All right, let's dive into one of the wildest corporate mysteries in the tech world. It's the story of a company that became an absolute titan, putting smartphones into millions of our pockets, all while basically being invisible. It's a fascinating story.
So take a look at these names: Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, Realme. There's a pretty good chance you're actually watching this on a phone made by one of them. Now on the surface, they look like fierce competitors, right? All fighting for your money. But that is not the whole story, not even close.
Because the truth is, all of these huge, well-known brands, they all sprouted from a single common ancestor. A super secretive parent company that pulled off one of the quietest, most successful takeovers of the global smartphone market we've ever seen.
Okay, so first up, let's solve this smartphone family mystery. We're going to peel back the layers and find that hidden thread that ties all these different devices together. And here it is. The name at the center of this whole web is BBK Electronics. Now, if you're thinking, I've never heard of them, well, you're not alone. And honestly, that's what makes this so incredible. They built an absolute empire without ever becoming a household name.
So who was this phantom giant? Well, BBK Electronics was a Chinese multinational founded way back in 1995. They made all sorts of electronics, TVs, audio gear, that kind of thing. But their real genius, their secret sauce, was acting as this quiet, behind-the-scenes parent company, launching the very brands that would eventually take over the world.
And check this out. The name itself is a huge clue to their whole philosophy. BBK actually comes from the Chinese phrase bu bu gao, which means rising step by step. And as you're about to see, that name perfectly describes their patient, methodical, and ridiculously successful strategy.
So let's get into how this whole thing even started, because this wasn't some happy accident. Oh no, this was a deliberate, brilliant strategy from one man who had this vision of creating an empire by basically splitting it apart from the inside.
And this is the guy, the main character in our story, the founder, Duan Yongping. In the mid-90s, he actually left his previous company after some disagreements and set out to create BBK, kicking off a journey that would totally reshape the entire electronics industry.
The first few years really set the stage for everything. BBK gets founded in '95. Their first products weren't even smartphones, they were corded telephones back in '96. But the real game-changing move came in 1999. Duan makes this totally radical decision. He breaks his young, successful company into 3 completely separate parts.
And this was his strategy in action. It was genius. He created an AV factory, which was basically the seed that would grow into Oppo. He created a telephone factory, which would become Vivo, and then a third division for educational gadgets. He was literally creating internal competitors, forcing them to fight it out for market share, all while secretly sharing BBK's resources. It was a masterstroke.
And if you fast forward to today, you can see how that family tree just exploded. Oppo went on to launch its own huge sub-brands, like OnePlus and Realme. And at the same time, Vivo launched its own, IQO. And they all trace their DNA right back to that original strategic split.
So the big question is, did this bizarre strategy of making your own companies compete with each other actually work? Well, that brings us to the next chapter. How BBK used this approach to just quietly conquer the world, without anyone even knowing the name of the company pulling all the strings.
And the result? Get this. By the first quarter of 2017, this invisible parent company had shipped so many phones across all its brands that it became the second largest smartphone manufacturer on the entire planet. Just wow.
I mean, just look at these numbers. In that single quarter, BBK shipped 56.7 million phones. That put them ahead of massive household names like Apple and their big Chinese rival at the time, Huawei. They pulled this off not by having one mega brand, but by having their whole family of brands, Oppo, Vivo, and the others, just completely dominate different markets and different price points, all at the same time.
But right when you think you've figured out this hidden giant, the story takes another seriously weird turn. And that brings us to the next mystery, the disappearing parent company. I mean, how does one of the world's biggest tech companies just vanish into thin air?
Because that is literally what happened. On April 7, 2023, the corporate entity at the heart of this entire empire, BBK Electronics, was officially deregistered. Poof. It just ceased to exist.
So why on earth would a company at the absolute top of its game just dissolve itself? Well, the official reason points to the rising geopolitical tensions.
The whole move was a strategic play, really, designed to shield its valuable brands from potential regulatory heat that was being aimed at large Chinese corporations.
So here's what that actually looks like. Before, you had BBK as the central mothership. Now, that mothership is gone. Oppo and Vivo and all their sub-brands are now structured as completely separate, independent companies. The kids have officially and formally flown the coop.
So let's wrap this all up. After this absolutely incredible story of a hidden empire and its very strange disappearance, what does it all mean? What are the big takeaways here?
Well, the legacy of BBK is just massive. First, it proved that a wild strategy, making your own brands compete, can actually lead to total market dominance. It also showed that a company can become a global powerhouse without anyone knowing its name. For all of us, it means that the brands we see on the shelves, Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, they're now truly out on their own. And maybe most importantly, it's a huge reminder of how fast geopolitics can totally reshape massive global industries, almost overnight.
Which really leaves us with one last huge question to chew on. Was the end of BBK Electronics the end of a dynasty, or was it just the next step in its evolution, unleashing its now independent children to conquer the market in a whole new, maybe even more resilient way? I guess only time will tell. Thanks for tuning in.